All right, there we go. Thank you for joining. We are today going to talk about the four pillars of support in inclusive higher education. We will also cover what those pillars are. Again, thank you for bearing with me as I'm recovering. I appreciate your patience with me. With that said, my name is Elise Kramer. I am the program coordinator at IN. Tomorrow, you will receive the recording for this. That will include the slideshow. It will also include a few other resources. When you get the slideshow, this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out with anything you need, questions, comments, concerns. Happy to chat on the phone, over email, set up a call. That's up to you. With that said, this is just kind of some basic housekeeping. In the slides, you'll also get the link to the rest of our webinars. In March, we will talk about community resources. That will feature a guest speaker from DVR. April, we will talk about the various levels of support for college students. So if you think your student maybe doesn't qualify for inclusive higher education, but they still need extra support, April will kind of talk about what that looks like. And then May, we will go over the impact of inclusive higher education, looking at both statewide and national data to kind of talk about some outcomes. With that said, we will have Q&A throughout this. You can ask questions about things related, unrelated. I want this time to be helpful for you. And then just as a little disclaimer, IN is a nonprofit. It was started 10 years ago by a group of parents and teachers who looked at other states in the United States and realized students with intellectual disability can go to college there. Why not here? And so this was a group founded to go to the state of Colorado and ask for that change. And now we focus on education, outreach, expansion, and outcomes. I say that to let you know we don't provide direct services on campuses. So you'll hear me talk about staff members or implementing services. That is not me. That is not anybody at IN. We do provide technical assistance and support and things like that, but we don't work on campuses. So just a little disclaimer there. All right, so this is our agenda. We have a lot to cover today and only an hour to do it. So if I talk fast, bear with me. But again, there's lots of time for Q&A embedded. So I'm happy to expand if needed. So we're going to start with understanding inclusive higher ed in our state specifically. Then we'll talk about support provided in college for inclusive higher ed more broadly, how you can help your students work on those pillars now, and then we'll end with some resources. All right, let's jump right in. So inclusive higher education is specifically a college pathway for students with intellectual disability. The reason there is an asterisk there is some students have various other diagnosis medical categories, but still within their disabilities, they would require both accommodations and modifications to be successful academically. And we'll talk about what those are later in the slideshow. But that's kind of the key barrier. Does your student require academic modifications to be successful in college? With that said, because students in inclusive higher education earn those modifications, or receive those modifications, I should say, they earn a certificate credential. Students with modifications don't show the same depth or breadth of learning as students who are on a degree path. Therefore, students receive a certificate. It is still weighty, it is still meaningful, but I do like to encourage families and students, if you can, go to college on a track with supports that maybe are extra but are not modifications, and you can get a degree that way. I do encourage that. With that said, it's fully inclusive, fully normative. You will not see a segregated special education class on a college campus. Students are in the same classes with the same professors, same peers as everybody else. They do take courses that align with their career goal. So students don't necessarily have to worry about random prerequisites or things like that. They're learning specific skills to help prepare them for the future they want to have. And then all along the way, they participate in career readiness, independent living, campus community. We'll talk about all of that kind of throughout this webinar. And they receive staff and peer mentor support in the 4 domains, which we call the 4 pillars of support. So normally at this point in the webinar, I stop and I really kind of walk you through each of these yellow circles. That is going to be kind of the rest of our webinar. So for now, I will skip this, but we will come back to this slide. For now, I just want you to sort of see this graphic, see that those 4 pillars are academic, social, career, and independence. All right, so in Colorado, students can attend inclusive higher education at 8 institutions. The first one is the Office of Inclusive Services at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. This is the second of only 3 IHEs in the nation to receive program accreditation. So what that means is all of these institutions, the colleges and universities, have their own accreditation. So they're all accredited. However, the Office of Inclusive Services has received its own independent accreditation within the broader university, which really speaks to how high quality their programming really is. So they do offer on-campus living that is both in dorms or apartments, and that is a 4-year-long track. Elevate at Arapahoe Community College is in Littleton. As a community college, they don't offer on-campus living, so that is a commuter campus for everybody. Students can figure out what that means. Some students drive, although that is not the majority. Some students take the RTD bus or the light rail. That might include Access-a-Ride. Some students get rides from parents, grandparents, siblings, Uber. So that really depends on the specific student. And that is a 3-year-long program. The Global Inclusive Program at Regis University is in Denver. It's like Northwest Denver. Students can choose to live on campus if they would like to. They have dorms there. And Regis is a bit unique, and they have a 1-year track, a 2-year track, a 3-year track, and a 4-year track. So students can kind of choose however long they want to attend Regis, and there are different certificates at the end, depending on how long they've attended and how much they have learned. And then UNC Go On and Learn is in Greeley. Students there live in dorms. That is a 4-year program, much more traditional 4-year school. And then all of these schools have received a federal designation called CTP. In practice, what that means for you is students are eligible to receive federal financial aid. I did a whole webinar last semester on paying for college where I go much more in depth into that. You can access that on our website, or I can send that on later if anyone is interested. But just know federal financial aid is available to students who go to these 4 schools. And then just a reminder, if you go through IHE, you do get that certificate. It is a statewide certificate. It's weighty, it's meaningful. But if your student can access college on a degree path, I would encourage that. All right, and then this school year, both CSU and MSU Denver jumped on board as well. So CSU is the Rams Scholars Program that is in Fort Collins. That is specifically geared towards students who want a career in the agricultural field. So students who are interested in farming and working with animals, that kind of thing. It is a 3-year program. They'll have on-campus living eventually when they're ready. We don't know when that will be. And then MSU Denver is the Inclusive Higher Education Solutions, or IHES for short. That's right in the heart of downtown Denver on the Auraria campus. That's commuter campus. They don't have on-campus living there. So again, students take light rail, Uber, bus, they figure it out. And that's a 4-year program. And then next school year, Lamar Community College, which is in the far southeast corner of the state, and Pikes Peak State College in Colorado Springs will jump on board as well. Those are both 3-year programs. The main difference between them is Lamar Community College, because it is in such a rural, remote location, what's unique for them is they actually do have on-campus living despite being a community college. They're probably not going to launch that for a few school years. So for now, it'll be commuter, but that is to come. And then all of these schools have that CTP in progress. So they're working on getting that status. That's that federal financial aid status. CSU and MSU should have that by the end of the school year, ideally. Lamar and Pikes Peak probably will be an additional school year. And then again, when students graduate, they will get that same certificate credential. So far, what questions can I answer? And again, thank you for bearing with my voice as I recover. Okay, so I do want to quickly answer one very common question, which is when should my student go to college? I get that question all the time. And the answer is it depends on your student. So some students finish 12th grade and they are ready and they can go to college right after 12th grade. Some students need transition until the age of 21. Some students need maybe only a year or a semester of transition. So it's really hard to answer that question. What I will say is chat with your student's special education teacher. And if you're really not certain, you can always apply and see if your student is accepted. The directors of the programs have enough experience and foresight that they can typically tell, and they'll say to you, hey, I think your kid really needs a year or two more. They're not always right, but they have a pretty good pulse on it. It's not a great question, but it is not a great answer, but that is a common question I get. Before I go on, anything else?
I just wanted to clarify that for what you just say, so it's like continue with the process and apply, and then they're gonna have like an assessment to see where they are.
That's a great question. So the application process is lengthy. In general, it will contain it's not a typical application, but it kind of mirrors a typical college application where they'll probably have to state, the student will have to state why they want to go to college. They will have to submit a few letters of recommendation from teachers, bosses, soccer coaches, whoever. And then it will include an interview on campus where the staff will interview both the parents and the students to really get a feel for what are the students' skills, abilities, interests, all that kind of stuff. So the applications are a little bit longer than a traditional application, but really because they ask all kinds of questions like, how often do you shower? Does someone have to prompt you to do that? And so they really kind of match the population of student. And some of it will depend if they live on campus or not, but they really want to get a feel that will include looking through their IEPs, all kinds of stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Anything else before we chug along? All right. So, how are students supported in college? That's what we're here to talk about today. I want to bring your attention back to this graphic, and I want you to see these circles are all intertwined. There is not a pillar of inclusive higher education that is more important or less important in terms of students' development as a whole. A student may come in with excellent social skills, but they need much more support in academics. Another student may come in, they have no idea what they want their career goals to be, but they are white hot in independence, right? So it really is individualized, and you'll kind of hear me talk about that. But as a general rule, they are all very much intertwined. And that's something I want to kind of make sure we all understand before we keep going. So we're going to start with academics. A lot of us, when we think of a college class, we think of a lecture where the teacher stands up and talks for 90 minutes and the students sit there and write notes and hopefully they get it all. Maybe you can ask a few questions, but depends on the professor. And it's not very interactive. And really, that's not what happens on most college campuses. The growing reality are smaller classes that are more interactive, they are more socially dependent, and they really rely on a student to kind of take charge of their own learning and kind of be the leader in that. So with that, that can seem a little daunting for particularly students with intellectual disability. So to make it a little bit more manageable, students typically take 2 to 3 courses per semester. It will depend on their course of study, their interest level, their abilities. Some maybe only take 2, some can handle 4. I would say the vast majority take 3, and that includes 2 academic courses that are in line with their career goal, and then 1 course that we'll talk about in a few slides that includes more life skills training. Students will also take all of their courses for credit. They receive grades, they have a transcript. They are fully included in their course. So that might include group work, that might include giving a presentation in front of the class, if that's what's required, all kinds of things. Students are really fully included in their college courses, just like everybody else. They use their campus-wide supports. So in addition to help from staff and peer mentors, students are expected to go to the library and find books that help them write their papers. They're expected to go to the tutoring center, go to the writing center, all kinds of supports that are available to all students on the college campus are also available to students in inclusive higher education, and they're encouraged to use them. With that, students have really high expectations when they're sitting in their classes and they're at the library studying and they are wherever they are on campus, they are expected to behave like a college student, to interact with other college students. They are presumed to be competent because they are. They are there because they can handle it and because they want to get an education just like everybody else on that college campus, and they are treated as if that is the case. With that said, they have peer mentors to help support that. So peer mentors will often go into classes with them, help work with them on those group projects, or help them take notes or whatever that, may look like on a day-to-day basis. Peer mentors also implement what we call preview and review process. At the start of class, we're going to quickly chat about what happened in our last class. We're going to preview that, kind of make sure we're all on the same page. And then at the end of class, we are going to review what happened today. Let's check our notes. Let's make sure our assignments are all down. And so the specific peer mentor support might depend on the class. It might depend on the individual, but that's kind of the general way that peer mentors will support in classes. All right, so I said we would talk about accommodations and modifications. This is something that a lot of parents and students think they know, especially if you've been in IEP meeting since your child was 5. I like to review it just in case. So an accommodation changes how learning occurs or how learning is shown. But the term is that they cannot alter the essential course functions. What that means is students are expected to show the same depth and breadth of knowledge as students who don't receive accommodations. Examples would be you take the same test as the rest of your peers, but you do it in the testing center. So the accommodation is the smaller environment. Or maybe an extended time. You're writing the same paper, but instead of 5 days to write it, you get 7 days to write it. But the assignments themselves don't change with accommodations. As we're with modifications, that is an actual alteration to the what. The depth and breadth is adapted to meet a student's cognitive level. So maybe a professor says, 5-page paper due next week. Maybe your student, instead of writing a 5-page paper, maybe they do a 5-slide slideshow. And so they get to include lots of pictures and graphics and maybe a few sentences, but maybe not a lot. And then maybe instead of a week to write it, they get 2 weeks to write it. And so they may still get accommodations as well. The key piece here is most college professors are experts in chemistry, philosophy, whatever their content area is. The vast majority of college professors have no experience in education, and even fewer college professors have experience in special education. So they do not decide what the modifications are. At the start of a semester, students sit down with the IHE staff and they create what's called a person-driven plan, or PDP. You will also see the term person-centered plan, PCP. They're very interchangeable. They mean the same thing. I prefer person-driven because it really kind of shows that the student is in the driver's seat and they get to decide what that plan includes, what it doesn't include, all that kind of stuff. So the PDP covers all 4 pillars of inclusive higher education. And in the academic pillar, it will include what modifications work for them. So maybe every semester they do slideshows instead of papers, or maybe they can do more of the traditional work in this subject, but they need more adaptations in a different subject. So all of that is part of the PDP, which is all run by the inclusive higher ed staff. With that said, it's still the professors who do the grading. They grade based on a modified rubric. It's still up to them to assign grades. Students earn grades based on their actual work. I don't really see a lot of students who kind of get participation grades. They have a transcript and the grades will show, the transcript will show whatever grades they've earned. It does indicate, there's a little asterisk that says this grade was based on a modified course. So there is that. However, it is the professors who grade and they try to grade honestly and fairly. What students study, if they can dream it, they can do it. I really like the freedom and flexibility that students get when they are not on a degree seeking path. So I want to point out one of the examples on here is photojournalism. The student who studied that went to his campus and said, I really want to study photojournalism. I don't see that as an offered major. But guess what? He wasn't on a degree seeking path. So he could kind of build his own course plan. He took courses in photography, journalism, communications, marketing, business, all kinds of different courses so that he could build his own skill set to create his own photojournalism company. And he could do that because he didn't have to follow the prescribed path of the degree. And so that is a bit freeing, I think. Really, students can take any course that is offered on their campus, and you still have to take it in sequence, right? So you can't take a 300 level class until you've taken the 1 and the 200 level classes, but they're willing and they do take classes all over campus. Sometimes they have other inclusive higher ed students with them. Often they don't. And they're out there and they're doing college, studying whatever they want to study. And that's really exciting for me to see. And then I want to pull this quote. So every year we survey all kinds of stakeholders across inclusive higher education. And this was a quote that came out of our most recent survey from a faculty member at Arapahoe Community College, who said she became a better educator because she became more attuned to needs that probably always existed in her classroom, but she didn't know it. And now that she is kind of put front and center with students who have extra needs, she realizes, wow, probably everybody could benefit from me teaching a little bit differently. And so we really are seeing the benefits of inclusion across the board, which is really, really exciting. You can read that quote on your own. But we hear things like this all the time, which is great. From a social perspective, students have supported campus involvement. What that specifically looks like will vary from campus to campus. Some campuses have a minimum number of events that students are required to attend. Maybe they have to attend 2 a month, 1 a week, that kind of varies. Sometimes that includes, hey, we're all as a whole group going to the football game unless you opt out, right? So what that specifically looks like does vary on the campus as well as on the student, but it exists to some degree everywhere. Again, that's part of that student's person-driven plan. So when students hold those meetings, they do that every semester, they'll look at what are your social goals? What do you like? What do you not like? I just chatted with a student last week who said, I decided that I really wanted to create a Disney club because I love Disney. I love Disney World. I love Disney movies. And I want to hang out with other people on my college campus who also love Disney. So one of her social goals in her plan was to create a club. And so they helped her do that. She created a club that is open to everybody on campus, and it has attracted lots of students on campus who don't have disabilities, who she may not have interacted with had it not been for at PDP, where she got the chance to speak up and say, hey, I really want this club. Students also use peer mentors and various other natural supports. So peer mentors may say to students, hey, I saw a flyer on campus for pottery club. I know you like pottery. Let's go together. It might be vice versa. Students might say, I really want to go to pottery club, but I don't want to go alone. What peer mentor will go with me? And so they kind of figure out how to make that work until the student is comfortable enough at that club or in that environment for the peer mentor to kind of bow out. And that's common. Students will make friends in clubs, shocker, with other students who are in the club who like the same thing. And then they don't need those peer mentors anymore. Peer mentors, while they are in those clubs, do things like model behavior, identify opportunities for connection. So like, hey, that person over there looks really nice. Let's go talk to them, that kind of thing. And they may accompany students to events, but also off-campus activities. I chatted with a student last week who I said, what do you do with your peer mentor? And she said, we go to Target, and that's their activity. Sometimes they buy things, sometimes they just walk around the store. They just like getting off campus, and they both like Target, and so that's what they do. And then they just generally help integrate students into the campus community, whether that's in the classroom, at a football game, whatever that means. And then lastly, this is one that a lot of parents get a little concerned about. Students are on college campuses. That means they have the same rights and responsibilities and opportunities as everybody else on a college campus. That may include alcohol, that may include frat parties, things like that. And peer mentors are there to help support responsible risk taking. Rather than forbidding students from engaging in activities, it's, hey, you're an adult, you can do that, but I'm going to go with you and I'm going to make sure you're doing it safely. And we're going to have conversations before and after about what to expect. And then let's kind of debrief what happened, what could have gone differently, that kind of thing. So they're really supported in their safety in a social sense. All right, career. So again, we're going to bring up that person-driven plan. Students engage in job coaching and career counseling. So they figure out what do they want to do and why, and how can college help them get there. A student came in his freshman year and he said, I really want to be a rap artist. Well, you can't really major in rapping. So he ended up studying communications, which they chose that because they talked to him about why he wanted to be a rapper. And they were able to kind of figure out, okay, here are classes that will help feed that goal and give you some of the skills, but also skills that you can use elsewhere if that career does not work out. And then along the way, they kind of have a career development path. That does change per semester. I'm sorry, not per semester, per student, as well as per campus. One example of what that might look like. Year one could include career exploration. It might include some development of various skills, or at least an analysis of where a student's skills lie. Year two might include job shadows, on-campus job experiences, practicums. Certainly lots of students have jobs on campus at the dining hall, shelving books at the library, checking people in at the rec center. All kinds of jobs like that are really normative for college students to have. That is no different for students in inclusive higher education. Those jobs will just teach them general soft skills, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then years 3 and 4, this kind of depends if students are in a 3-year program or a 4-year program. But in general, that could include something like internships, paid off-campus employment if they have previously had on-campus employment, and then connecting with DVR. So lots of students have already been kind of involved with DVR before college, and then they go to college, and the on-campus career coach will kind of take over the reins. And then before they leave, before they graduate, the idea is to kind of pass off back to DVR so that there's an uninterrupted service providing happening. Before I go on, questions on career because that one can get a little bit confusing. All right. Some of those soft skills I mentioned. Students will learn how to do things like follow a schedule, not only showing up on time, but using time wisely once they're there. What tasks at work should require 25 minutes and what should require 5 minutes? Kind of figuring out how to keep yourself on track. Communicating with coworkers, interview prep as well as interview practice. How do you actually apply to a job, right? You got to fill out an application. If you're hired, there's often lots of paperwork that can be kind of arduous. So there's practicing doing that for the first time, right? And maybe it is in that on-campus bakery, but at least there's practice working through all of these skills in a more sheltered environment. Navigating timesheets can be hard, all kinds of the fun parts of having a job. And then independence. Again, students have, as I mentioned before, typically 2 academic classes and then 1 specialized class that is geared towards all of the students in inclusive higher education. And that class is typically an independent living class where students will learn things like money management, community access, travel training, self-advocacy development. They'll kind of learn self-advocacy through choice, which goes into their person-driven plan. And by that, I mean students are really, they run that plan. They get to decide what their goals are, how they want to get there. So self-advocacy is kind of baked in to the college experience all along the way. Students also have natural consequences. In college, if they do something wrong or they forget to put their food away into the fridge or whatever, no one's going to stop them. There are lots of natural consequences, and those are celebrated because that's how we learn. And there is a dignity of being allowed to fail and being allowed to learn from your mistakes and figuring out on your own what to do differently next time. Peer mentors will help students in how to use their downtime. I've got 3 hours between my 2 classes. Should I scroll through TikTok or should I study for my test? Peer mentors will also help students put things in their calendars. Every college student I know lives and dies by their calendar on their phone, on their computer. Everything's in there. They have reminders 10 minutes before class starts, and they even put in when they socialize and when they do homework and all kinds of things so that they can visually see how to best use their time. And then peer mentors will also help them use natural supports in all kinds of ways. Some students, not all, but some students do have additional needs in terms of residential living if they live on campus. So they typically do live with other IHE peers, and that's for ease of peer mentors coming in to support them. And that time is typically scheduled. So peer mentors may come to help them clean the apartment or do other types of chores, laundry, reminding them to shower, kinds of things like that. Excuse me. They may help them do grocery shopping, navigate roommate conflict, and then they will have natural support as well from RAs and RDs who are staff in those living environments. And then if, excuse me, if the inclusive higher ed staff is needed, they will step in. And then there is the SLS waiver, which many students, not all, do use for additional, additional supports. All right, thank you for bearing with me as I'm recovering from this cold that just won't kick it. What questions can I answer? All right, and for time, we're going to chug along, but I will check the chat. So if you need anything, throw it in there. All right, so how can you help support your student in working on the 4 pillars now before they get to college? Okay, so again, it's important to presume that students are competent because they are. College is a normative pathway, and we want to kind of recognize that, even for students, and maybe I should say especially for students with intellectual disability. Put it on the table as an option, but it's not the only option. And that is something that I really, really like to share with families. Informed choice is really important. Every year, not many, but maybe one or two students go to college because their parents, and I say inclusive higher ed students, go to college because their parents really kind of force them into it. And their parents mean well, but ultimately it's not the parents going to class, going to the social events, going to office hours. It is the student. So it's important to inform students what that looks like and give them the choice. Do they want that or not? And then kind of think about what skills will they need in college that they can start working on now, that they can kind of transfer. That is stuff that we'll talk about in just a few slides. Excuse me. And then before we keep going, I want to bring up this quote. High expectations mean everything. There was a study a few years ago that showed teachers' expectations have a greater impact on a student being employed or going to college than a student's skills or disabilities. So the way we approach students, the way we encourage students, the way we tell them what they can and cannot do matters. And that's kind of the backdrop I want you to have in your mind as we go through how to prepare students in each of these 4 pillars. With that said, one more quote before we keep going. This particular parent, her student graduated a few years ago. He is pretty limited in his verbal skills. He mostly communicates with an augmented communication device. And he graduated, he's working, he's really thriving now. And his mom said, the bar has been set high and the students have risen and reached it. They've been presumed competent and their lives changed. And she thought, there's no way my student could go to college. And he did. And he is in a place now that she never would have predicted he could be. All right. So with that kind of impassioned speech, let's keep going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a variety of ways you can prepare your students in each of the pillars, fully recognizing there's a lot here. There's too much to tackle for anybody. So I want to encourage you to pick either like 1 or 2 things in each pillar, or maybe one pillar that you want to focus hard on to work with your student on in preparation for college. I want to make very clear, no one can do all of this. You know your students best. Let's get going. So with that, it's important to help students build their literacy skills, particularly if they have gone through transition or they graduated a while ago. When students are in transition, the focus is no longer on academics. It's on what can they do to prepare for independent living. So a lot of students kind of forget those reading and writing skills. It's important to keep those up. That can include basic sentence and paragraph structure, reminding students that sentences start with capital letters and end with punctuation, right? Or sentences have a subject and a verb. Basic things that it's important to keep reminding students about. Note-taking big ideas. That could include, we just watched a movie as a family. Let's talk about the key plot points in the movie. And maybe we're even going to practice writing those down or dictating them to our computer, right? But practicing synthesizing information, that is a skill that lots of students, even students who don't have disabilities, really struggle with when they get to college. And then they sit through a 90-minute class and they don't really know what to do with all of the information. It can be really overwhelming. So that's something to practice with all of your children. Email etiquette is a big one. We often see students who have never used email before, and then they go to college and all of their professors communicate with them by email. That's pretty much it. That's how they communicate. If students aren't taught to kind of code switch, right? Emails have to be a little bit more formal, slightly more professional. They start with a dear so-and-so, right? They end with your name. Thank you so much for your help. Not only that, but a lot of our students, if they are not taught differently, treat email like texting, or they'll send an email for every single thought that comes into their mind. And now a professor has 12 emails from the same student, and that's overwhelming for them. So practicing synthesizing all of our thoughts into one email before we hit send, that can be really helpful. So I encourage students at the end of a school day, or it could be at the end of every single subject, send an email to your teacher, to your parent, whoever, that says, in class we did this, our homework is this. Or at the end of the day to say, in math we did this, in English we did this, in gym we did this. Just to really practice getting in the habit of sending as well as receiving emails. Audiobooks are really big. If students are not used to getting information auditorily, that can be a bit jarring. So I don't care what you're reading. It could be Alice in Wonderland. It could be Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, whatever. Try audiobooks. Those can be very, very helpful. And then students should know their learning needs. That includes their strengths and weaknesses. It also includes what accommodations and modifications they need to be successful. That will help that person-driven plan in major ways. And then lastly, technology. As I already mentioned, email is a really big one, but so is Office software and submitting assignments electronically. Very, very few college professors anymore accept assignments on paper. Almost all assignments are submitted digitally. Most high schools use Google Classroom, Infinite Campus, Schoology, lots of different forms that a learning management system might take. And it's important for students to practice interacting with those systems, even if the system changes when they get to college, just so that they kind of know in general, how does that work? And then assistive technology. Google Read and Write is a free plugin. I highly suggest downloading it on your student's computer if they don't already have it. That is a life changer. It is a free speech to text, text to speech software. And again, they may use a different one in college. They may use the same one in college, but it at least allows them to practice using it. And then academically, you should explore students' academic interests. What do they like? What do they want to study? Practice attendance and punctuality. College classes don't wait for your students to arrive 5 minutes late because the transition between classes was overwhelming. They start and they go. And attendance is important. And every minute is precious in those classes. So start practicing that in high school, in transition, even practicing it on dinner reservations, all kinds of things. Lots of students don't have experience participating inclusively. And then they get to a college campus and they're in a room of 20 typical students and 2 students with disabilities, and that feels really jarring. So I encourage you to get your students involved in sports clubs, summer camp, whatever you can, so that they are used to engaging in an inclusive environment and so that they expect their environments to be inclusive. This one is important and it's hard. Taking ownership for high quality work. Students should be proud of every single assignment they submit. It should be their best work. There's always room for growth, right? But I think oftentimes teachers will kind of take anything from our students and just kind of say, yeah, you did it, congrats. And that's not the case in college. Their work is expected to be high quality. And so practicing that now. I was a classroom teacher before this, and I always asked students, are you proud of this? And if they even hesitated, I would say, we're going to go back and do it again because it's important to be proud of it. In college with that PDP, students will be setting their own goals and tracking their own goals. So while a lot of the IEP kind of goal setting stuff happens behind the scenes, there are lots of goals that students can track on their own. They can track how many assignments they turned in without extended time. They can track how many times they remembered their lunch money, right? All kinds of different things. And even tracking basic things. How many times did you do your laundry this month without prompting? Can be really helpful in just teaching them how to generally track informal data. And then following a schedule is really important. In high school, students' days are really prescribed. They're told to go to first period and then second period and then third period. And there's a bell schedule, and there may be even an adult shepherding them from place to place. All that goes out the window in college. They got to get themselves from class to their 3-hour break, to their next class, to their internship. Yes, there's peer mentor support, especially in the very beginning, but that will fade. Students are expected to be as independent as possible. And so I encourage working on that now. Start putting in your students' classes, clubs, sports teams, whatever, in their phone calendar now and encouraging them to follow it as independently as they possibly can. And then this is a big one, constructive criticism. Students will receive notes on their work that they kind of miss the mark. They'll receive criticism from their roommates. They'll receive criticism from their bosses, right? This is something that just as we grow as people, the more people we interact with, the more constructive criticism we will naturally have to hear. And that is something that I encourage to start working on with your students now. Not everything is perfect. It's okay. Not everything has to be perfect, and that's okay too. But where there is room for improvement, work on giving that feedback and work on helping your student hearing that feedback and coming up with a plan for improvement. And that goes along with this persistence and growth mindset piece. It is really frustrating for all of us when we feel like, hey, I worked on that thing for like 20 hours and you're now telling me it's not good enough. That sucks. It really does. But sometimes we just got to persist, and there's always room for growth, or maybe not always. There's often room for growth and really working on that growth mindset. I didn't do my best on that yet, but I can, and I will. In terms of social life, it's important for students to have self-awareness and self-regulation. This is a really key piece for two main reasons. One is more obvious, right? You want your students to be able to self-regulate. But the second one is if students are in inclusive higher education, or to say if they're applying to inclusive higher education, I often am asked from parents, my student only reads on a first grade reading level. Can they really access a college curriculum? And yeah, they can. That's what those modifications are for, to help them access that college curriculum. The number one reason why students are not accepted into inclusive higher education is not because of their academic skill set. It is because of their ability or inability to self-regulate. But in a college class, if things get overwhelming, which they sometimes do, is it okay to just have an abrupt eruption? Probably not, right? And so some of those self-regulation skills are going to be necessary even for the application process, but certainly they're necessary for life. Schedule management, we already talked about. This is in social though, because some students will get, for example, like a text from a friend, hey, do you want to do lunch at 12 o'clock? Yes, I do want to do lunch at 12 o'clock. I'll see you at lunch at 12 o'clock. Oh, I've got a class at 12 o'clock. So what do? Do I skip my class? So helping students figure out, hey, 12 o'clock doesn't work. How about 2 o'clock? Or how about tomorrow instead of today? All of that kind of fits into a student's social abilities and successes. As well as personal needs communication. This kind of goes into that self-regulation piece, right? I don't like it when this person seems really mean to me. What do I do about it, right? And that goes into certainly lots of the pillars in inclusive higher ed as well. That has a big piece though in conflict and relationship management. Find me a person, find me a college student who has no conflict. This is particularly true though for students who live on campus. I don't know about you. When I was in college and I lived in a dorm, I could reach both arms out and touch 2 beds. We had some conflict. It's hard to live that close to someone for a long time, right? And so practicing some of those skills now. It's easy for parents to step right in when siblings are bickering, or you hear your kid has a friend over and they're fighting or whatever. Do your best to kind of let them hash it out. Practice those skills. Adaptability is a big one. Lots of professors, all kinds of people on a college campus will say things like, hey, I'm sick, I'm canceling our 2 o'clock class. Well, guess what? It's 1:45. I was preparing to go to class in 15 minutes. Having adaptability can be really helpful and kind of going with the flow. That's okay. Class was canceled. That's more time to work on my homework for the other class, go see my friends, whatever that may be. And then we already talked about responsible risk taking, but I want you to try to find places where you can encourage your students to start taking risks now, to start identifying what risks are responsible, what happens if it goes wrong, while they kind of have that safety net of mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever at home to support that. And then appropriate use of social media is a really, really big one. Lots of students think anybody who friends them on social media must be their friend, must be a good person. We all know that's not true. It's never a bad time to start teaching those types of lessons, making sure your students' social media is private, all that kind of stuff. And then natural supports. On a college campus, that's all students do. They use their natural supports. So what does that look like in your life? Maybe you go to the grocery store, you don't know where the olives are. What do? You ask the person who works at the grocery store, where are the olives? So maybe instead of you asking, you go to the store with your student and you have them ask, right? So what would anybody else do in that situation, and have your student be the one who practices doing that thing so that when they're alone on their campus, they know that's what you do. In terms of career, start looking for ways to help your students work on time management, communication strategies, problem solving. Motivation and initiative is a huge one. Rather than having a boss give me one task at a time, maybe I'm going to ask for 3 tasks. And then after 3, I get a break, or I get candy, or I get whatever my kind of incentive is. So really kind of focus on keeping my motivation and finding the initiative where I need to find it, rather than just sitting and waiting for someone to tell me what to do next. Self-advocacy, we've talked about a bunch. That applies kind of everywhere. Social emotional understanding is a big one. I have so many students who I ask them, what did you learn at your job? 95% of them tell me customer service skills. They say that in one way or another. If you have a job, you interact with people who maybe aren't the happiest. And learning how to work with them is a really, really important skill. And that kind of goes along with coping techniques. It's not fun to be the person who is getting yelled at because something went wrong that you had nothing to do with, but you're the face of the organization and I don't want to be here. I don't like that. You don't like it, right? Your students certainly don't like that, but they don't know how to handle that without coping techniques. And so practicing those skills, even in really minor ways, can help them prepare for when it is something major and they are on their own. And now what are they going to do? And then in terms of independence, students will be navigating campus by themselves. Your mentors typically will help in the first few weeks. The goal is to kind of graduate them away, for students to be able to remember how to get from my dorm to my math class to the dining hall to wherever. So they can practice navigating their high school campuses independently if they don't. Personal and campus safety, students will all be interacting with their campus police forces, so that they know who to go to if something really wrong does happen. And so helping them kind of figure out what is the equivalent of that on their high school campus or out in the world writ large. Community access and travel. Maybe you're going to go to a Nuggets game and you want to take the light rail. This is an example. Have your student go to the RTD website, look up the schedule, figure out what line is the closest to your house, and have them take you to the Nuggets game. Yes, you'll be there to correct them, help them, whatever. But we can all start practicing these skills now in more fun ways. Downtime is a big one. As I already mentioned, there's so much more downtime in college than in high school. So helping students figure out how to use that appropriately and responsibly is necessary. If your student has a more complex medical need, or maybe it's not complex, maybe they take one medicine a day, have them practice doing that on their own. And I encourage you just to start with a daily vitamin. That way, if they forget, it's okay. Things will, be fine. We're not going to have any medical emergencies from forgetting a vitamin, but you at least get to practice, or your student gets to practice doing that on their own so that when they're in college, they got it. They can do all their medicine on their own. Self-care and cleanliness. So how can you help your student come up with a plan to shower every day, every other day, do their laundry weekly? How often are they washing their sheets? What kind of chores are they doing at home? All of these things can and should start happening ASAP, just in general, for when your students are adults. But on a college campus, you're not going to be there to remind them, did you shower today? And then certainly get in contact with lots of different agencies, your case management agencies, DVR, ARC chapters. There's lots of different agencies who will help your students be successful in college. Get in contact with them now. And then money management is a really big one. Lots of our students have never had to budget anything before. I encourage you to do grocery shopping online with your student and say, okay, our budget is $100. What do you want? Put it in the cart. Okay, great. Now our budget or our price in the cart is $300. That's triple what we have to spend. What can we take out? Okay, we don't need the Jolly Ranchers. We don't need 7 gallons of milk, right? And so helping them kind of figure that out. Start it online, then go into the store. Maybe you give them a gift card with $50 or $100. All right, you go do the shopping, check out. And so that can happen in stages and in a variety of ways. But once students are on a college campus, they receive their student ID. And almost always, you load money onto their account, and their student ID is their credit card on campus. And it kind of feels like monopoly money because you don't see it. You maybe can check your, check your account balance. But oftentimes for the students, they don't even load it themselves. Their scholarship money loads it or their parents load it. And so what do you do now when you have this kind of monopoly money feeling and you've never spent money before? That can be a problem. So helping students learn how to do that responsibly before they have the opportunity to do that irresponsibly. And then again, chores, lots of other home-based responsibilities you can work on now. All right, I'm going to skip this just to kind of walk you through what is coming in this. So when you receive this PowerPoint tomorrow, each of these, if you click it, will download onto your computer. So just various resources and handouts and things that I think will be helpful for you in kind of visualizing some of these. And then just other resources that might be helpful for you. We only have 2 minutes, so I'm not going to walk you through what they are. You can explore that on your own. And now I will stop for questions. Thank you all again for bearing with my voice. I'm happy to stay in chat. If you don't have any questions, thank you for coming. Free to go. I don't have any questions, anything at all.
Thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate that you explained everything to us. I guess my question is like, where is the next steps now? Because I know, like in my case, right? My son is graduating from high school this May 23rd. And I know they have their summer, and then I believe they start again sometime in August, right?
Yep.
So when is the time frame that I have right now to start the process and to know what he's gonna do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of the applications for next year have already closed. At CSU, UCCS, and UNC, applications for next fall already closed.
Okay.
Regis's will close at the end of February, and then the other 4 are all rolling applications, meaning they won't close. They'll stay open. I would still encourage you and your son to apply as soon as possible, just to apply now. If there's 40 people applying for 5 spots, right, you probably want to be among the first 5 and not the last 5. And so I would encourage you to at least start looking into the applications, gathering those materials and things. And I would say it's better to apply and then say, no, thank you. We're going to hold off for a year rather than wait until August and go, class starts next week. I really wish we had done that, because then it's too late.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then where do I find all the application? In your website, in the papers that you're sending to us?
Great question. Yes. So I have them linked on my website. I will include that. I'll write that down. I will include that in my email tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions I can answer? All right, and what I will do actually